Welcome to the Workplace Minute, powered by H3 Advisors and sponsored by WorkHuman. Thanks for joining me for a quick update on what's important in the world of work. My name is Steve Boese. Today in the Workplace Minute, we're digging into a set of lawsuits that are quickly becoming one of the most important stress tests yet for HR tech. Legal actions aimed at how AI is being used to screen, score, rank, and route job applicants, often at enormous scale and mostly with very little visibility for the people who are actually being evaluated. Let's break it down. Two providers are at the center of this issue. The first is Workday, where an ongoing case has become a landmark in the question of whether an HR tech vendor can be drawn directly into discrimination litigation tied to its algorithmic screening tools. And the second is Eightfold AI, which is now facing a new lawsuit that frames algorithmic applicant scoring not only as a fairness issue, but as something more specific, involving the creation of secret reports about job seekers that the applicants never see, they can't challenge, and they may not even know exist. So let's start first with what's happening, because the details matter. In the Workday matter, the plaintiff has alleged that after applying for a very large number of roles at companies who are using hiring workflows powered by Workday, that he was repeatedly rejected, and that automated screening played a meaningful role in those outcomes. The case has moved forward through several key procedural stages, including a very significant development. The court allowed claims to proceed on what's known as agency theory, essentially recognizing the possibility that if a vendor's tools are effectively operating as part of an employer's hiring process, the vendor might not be insulated from liability themselves simply because they're just using our software. And more recently, the case has reached a stage where the age discrimination claims have been allowed to proceed on a broader, more collective basis, which is another marker that this is no longer a fringe dispute. This case is becoming a test case for the entire category. Now on to Eightfold. This week brought news of a new lawsuit filed in California that targets Eightfold AI's AI-powered applicant assessments from a different point of view. The plaintiffs in this case allege that Eightfold creates profiles and evaluation outputs about these job applicants, things like inferred traits, rankings, predictions, and these are used to support hiring decisions, but, and here's the clear point, without notice to the applicant and without a meaningful chance for them to see what was generated or to dispute any possible inaccuracies. Now that framing is important because it tries to connect the AI hiring assessments to long-standing consumer protection expectations. Mainly, if a third party is generating reports used for employment, that there are rules about transparency, access, and the right to dispute. Now, whether the plaintiffs ultimately prevail is not the point of today's show. The point is that the legal system is now actively interrogating what these AI outputs are, what they do, and what obligations should be attached to them. So what does this all mean for you? Well, I want to break down the way we look at this into three parts. First, what it means to current customers of these solutions. Next, what it means for potential customers. And finally, what it suggests for HR leaders everywhere, even if you don't use Workday or Eightfold or something like it. So if you're a current customer of AI-enabled screening, ranking, matching, or candidate prioritization tools, the lesson here is simple. You should assume that we didn't build the algorithm will not be viewed as a protection or a complete risk strategy. This is the moment to think about your governance and your documentation. You'll want to know exactly where automation is being used in the recruiting funnel, what decisions it's influencing, and what human overrides look like in practice, not just in a presentation, but in the actual deployed workflows of your recruiters and your hiring managers. Because in litigation or in regulatory scrutiny, the questions are going to be the same. What was the process? What was the decision? And who can explain it? This is also a moment to get very serious about your vendor management. What commitments does your contract make about bias testing, validation, monitoring, and support during disputes? What do you receive in terms of audit artifacts, documentation of the AI models, change logs, evidence of ongoing testing for adverse outcomes? And finally, if the vendor updates AI models or changes scoring logic or tunes the recommendation engines, do you have visibility into when that happens and what it actually changes? These are all critical for customers. And you should be also watching jurisdictional compliance, not just at the federal level. If you happen to hire in New York City, for example, there are specific obligations that are tied to automated employment decision tools for bias audits, notices, and public disclosure. And even if you're outside New York City, this is the directional trend. It's towards more transparency requirements, more documentation expectations, and more scrutiny of outcomes. Now, if you're a potential customer evaluating these kinds of tools, the implications are even more immediate because you can still design your policies and your approaches before you implement. This is kind of like a due diligence moment for AI in hiring. You should be asking potential vendors to explain in very plain language what their system is doing. Is it screening out candidates? Is it ranking candidates? Is it recommending candidates? Is it just assisting a human who makes these decisions? In other words, is the tool driving selection decisions or is it just information? Then you want evidence and not just assurances about how the systems are validated, what fairness testing is conducted, what data is used, how any model drift is monitored, and what transparency features exist for recruiters and, more importantly, for candidates. I would also encourage potential buyers to expand how they define risk. The Eightfold lawsuit is a reminder that risk may not be limited to discrimination claims. It may also include questions about notice, explainability, candidate access to information, the ability to correct errors, especially when attributes and predictions are being created by AI about individuals. If your procurement process treats AI just like another tool or a feature and not like a governed decision support system, you're going to be behind where the market is going. Now for the last bucket, what HR leaders in general can take away from this, even if you're not a customer of Workday or Eightfold or something like that. Well, the most important takeaway is that AI hiring risk is no longer confined to innovator companies. The entire hiring ecosystem is now becoming algorithmically mediated through ATS workflows, matching engines, assessments, video interview tools, sourcing platforms, even job ads and job targeting. And as that happens, the burden is shifting towards HR leadership to treat selection processes as something that must be actively governed, continuously monitored, and clearly explainable. That means HR leaders need to elevate a few capabilities that frankly too many organizations still treat as optional. Strong job-related selection criteria, disciplined documentation of why this criteria matter, consistent structured processes that reduce chaos, and regular monitoring for disproportionate outcomes. AI doesn't remove bias from a broken process. It can simply scale these problems much faster. And there's one more layer that matters here, trust. Candidates already feel like hiring is opaque, impersonal, and arbitrarily unfair. If the market narrative hardens into you're being scored by AI systems that you can't see, the damage to your talent brand is real, even for companies with good intent. HR has to be able to say, we use technology to improve consistency and speed, and we test for fairness, and we provide appropriate transparency, and humans still are accountable for decisions. Stepping back, what we're seeing here is a category-wide transition. HR tech vendors are being pulled into the accountability conversation, employers are being pushed to treat AI as a governed selection system, and regulators and plaintiffs' attorneys are actively experimenting with how existing laws should apply. This isn't about stopping innovation. It's about making sure innovation doesn't unfairly impact those upon which it is applied. So if you're an HR leader, the call to action is straightforward. Inventory where automation tools touch hiring, establish governance and documentation that can survive scrutiny, demand real transparency and auditability from your vendors, and design hiring processes that you can defend, not just operationally, but ethically. Because the future of AI in hiring won't be decided by hype cycles. It will be decided by whether these tools can earn trust and real-world accountability. Thank you so much for listening, and a big thank you to WorkHuman for supporting the Workplace Minute. If this episode made you think about how your organization is using AI technology to facilitate people decision-making, please share it with a colleague. I'm Steve Boese, and this has been the Workplace Minute from H3 HR Advisors.